Hello. Greetings, everybody. Hope everyone's having a good Friday. Yeah, I like that song, Be Still and Know Your God. It said, we will soar with him above the storm. You know, there's a place that egos transcend it. There's a place of stillness. And I just want to invite the presence of God, as far as let it clean us, refresh us, fill us, free our hearts today. Let us help us, O Lord, to transcend our ego, to walk in awareness of your presence, in the light of your presence, in the shadow of your wings. Let us abide there, stay there. We just honor you and acknowledge you, Father. We invite you into our awareness, into our consciousness. As the love that you are, as the peace that you are, as the joy that you are, as the righteousness that you are, we invite you into our consciousness this day, O Father God. Today I'll be teaching a little bit, and for some this teaching will, for some what I say today, this teaching will resonate with them. It'll strike a chord in their hearts. It'll do something. And for other people, that might not have the same effect. But that's okay. For some people, it will help bring them up to a different level. And the end of one level will become the beginning of another. And for other people, it might not have that effect, but that's okay. I can remember reading in the Gospels, or on the Sermon on the Mount, I believe it was, where Jesus was talking about the eye for an eye. You know, and he goes, you've heard it said this, that an eye for an eye, but he said, I say unto you to turn the other cheek. You know? An eye for an eye, and the tit for the tat, and the jot for the tittle had its purpose and its time and place. Yet once consciousness was raised, once consciousness was resurrected, the law lost its significance in the law of love. You know? And so a tooth for a tooth. So there's place for the law. There's this place for the law until your consciousness is raised, until it's resurrected, until you remember the love that you are, and grow out of that. The law is there. The law is there for those that are still asleep, that are still caught up in the dream of a hostile world, of a world where we're separate from one another, and we've got to there's a ladder to climb and all that, you know. The law is still there for the people that are asleep. They need it. They need it. But when they wake up, they find out, well, it was all just a dream. I don't have to strike back. I don't have to hit back. I don't have to be at war with the world that I'm in. I don't have to resist life. I can flow with it. I can float in it. I can breathe here. I can be here. I can live here fully, abundantly, joyfully, with peace in my heart. You know. And we can enter back into the silence and the stillness. That embraces everything. The silence and the stillness, which is like the balsam of God Himself, you know. So today I want to consider what is food for silence. What is food for silence? What feeds the silence or the stillness? What nourishes a body of stillness and a body of silence? What is it that promotes it, that lends itself to it? What brings us and draws us into that silence, that stillness, that light? I can think of a number of things. Trust does. Trust does. It seems like when we're trusting, there's a silence that clothes ourselves with that trust. Wonder and awe does. We're left speechless with our mouths open at some stuff, It lends itself to the silence. Love does. Love does. Hope does. Patience does. When we're impatient, we raise our voice. When we're without hope, we tend to lash out. But hope and patience lend themselves to that silence. The light of truth itself does, And if the world needs anything at all today, I would say it's silence. It needs the stillness. We need to get back in touch with it as individuals, as a society, as a body of humanity. We all need to get back in touch with the stillness, with the silence, with the being okay of everything just as it is. What pulls us away from that, Well, desires do. Desires to get something, desires to get rid of something. Things we're attracted to, things we're not attracted to, that we love and that we hate, I remember when I was a kid, the Beatles used to sing a song, "If you wanted it, here it is, come and get it. You better hurry because it's going fast. It may not last." And that sort of reflected the emerging of a way of thinking that was growing predominant in society at that time. This attitude, this collective consciousness of lack, of pain, of having to hurry, having to jump into, having to grab up and hold to and grab stuff because it's on its way out. All the consciousness of lack, a fear that was growing at that time, and has actually increased quite a bit since then. A fear of loss, a fear of missing out on something. Being filled with anticipation and apprehension. A very, very busy, very, very engaged, a very, very hurried society, hurried body of humanity. This even went on in the times when Jesus Christ walked the earth. In the Gospel of Matthew, we're given this account. It says that Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in the synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. But when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. So Jesus looked out at this body of humanity, and he seen it, people as being harassed and helpless, like a sheep without a shepherd, hurried, busy, out of sorts, freaking out, driven like cattle, by their desires, by their aversions, wandering around like a sheep without a shepherd, in desert places, lost, seeking rest, finding none, in a deep need of green pastures and still waters. And he had compassion on them, it says. It says that he had compassion on them because they were harried and helpless. He had compassion on them because they were harried and helpless. He had compassion upon them because he was acquainted with that pain. He knew that pain. He spent 40 days and nights in the desert himself, according to the record, and wandered around in the desert for 40 days and nights by himself. He knew what it was like to find himself in the silence of the desert, to encounter the very desires that drive every man, that hurry every man, that push and pull every man in the world. He encountered all that in the desert, in the silence. The desert's a very silent place, a very quiet place, a very lonely place. It's a place that you get alone with yourself. In the desert, Jesus faced the self that he feared to be. And when we enter into the desert, we face the self that we fear to be, you know. It's in the desert, it's in the wilderness, it's in that place of uncertainty and place of not knowing, in the quietness and the stillness that we come to know our fear. And to see your fear for what it is. We have to know our fear to disempower it. We have to know our fear to disempower it so it doesn't drive us and push us and pull us. And to get intimate with the silence. That is our destiny to be with and to just be. We have to be willing to get to know the fear. We have to be willing to see the fear for what it really is. And once we see the fear, it just falls away from us when we see it for what it really is. To see where it really comes from. The illusions, the notions, the beliefs of lack. The beliefs of scarcity. The beliefs of a separate self. But once we look at the fear, really look at it, it's like the light of our consciousness just dissolves it and vaporizes it. In this body of fear, it's like it got shot with one of them laser beams on one of those sci-fi movies, and it just glowed and disintegrated and turned into a vapor and floated away, you know. That's what the light of our consciousness does to a body of fear when we give it the loving attention. And then once the fear is gone, we awaken to the silence, to the stillness, to the peace that was there all along, buried underneath that fear, you know, to the quietness, to the softness of being itself. And being itself has a quietness and a softness to it, you know, a very, very gentleness. A lot of things were said about Jesus during his time. A lot of things were said about him after his time. And there were things that were said about him even before his time, you know. People throughout the scriptures referred to him the in the text of the ancient prophets, and a prophet called Isaiah wrote this about him. He said, "Behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation of stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation, and that he that believes shall not make haste." Another version or translation said, "See, I lay in Zion a tested stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. The one who relies on it will never be stricken with panic." Never be stricken with panic. Never be stricken with panic. And people refer to the sure foundation as a person, as being Jesus himself. But I think it's much deeper than that. I do. I think the sure foundation is a way of being, a way of living. And it's more of that than the idol that people make Jesus into being. A sure foundation is the living way. Jesus himself said, he said, "I am the way, the truth, the life." It's not a dead way. He's not a dead way. He's a living way. A living way. I see that sure foundation as being a living way, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a tried stone, a living way that's gone through life, that's been through it. A living way. And there really is no way to live, because life itself is the way. Life itself is the way. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Not as like the way is one thing and the truth is another thing and the life is a separate thing. No, the way and the life and the truth, they're all one thing. And they're all alive. The way is alive. The truth is alive. The life is alive. You know, we're talking about things that are alive. Not some past image of some person that people have made a religion about and made doctrines about and made into an idol of a sort. Not about that. No, not about that at all. This is about a way, a truth, a life that is vibrant and alive and bright and shining, you know. Not a dead way, a living way. Yet we find ourselves seeking to establish and to propagate and enforce rules of being upon one another. And upon ourselves. we try to enforce laws for living. Laws for being. We do. We say, we look at ourselves and say to ourselves, and we say to one another, you shouldn't feel that way. You should feel that way. You shouldn't think that way. You should think this way. You shouldn't do that. You should do this. All laws that we try to put in practice, and all trips that we lay on one another and that we lay on ourselves. Basically a bunch of head trips that really make life into a drag. But the living way is not a holding to and enforcing of any sort of belief or notion that we might have. The living way is not a way of should not or should be or ought to be or ought not or could be or could not. It's none of that stuff. The living way is none of that stuff. All that stuff are ways to live, but it's not the living way. It's not the living way. Ways to live are not the same thing as the living way. Jesus is the living way. Life is the living way. All our beliefs and notions amount to ways to live that we make into laws and rules for being. But what would happen if we dropped all the should be's and the shouldn't be's? What if we dropped all the laws and the rules for being? What would happen to all of our fears if we just dropped it all? What would happen to all our fears? What would become of us? What would we become? Yes, Iris Free, that's correct. What would we become? What would we be without our story? Yet in its time, the law has its purpose, and fear has its purpose. Fear is there for a reason. When we take away the labels of good and bad away from the fear, and just let the fear be fear. Just fear, that's all it is. Just fear. Just fear. Not a fear that makes us good, not a fear that makes us bad. Not a fear that makes us right, not a fear that makes us wrong. Because fear does none of that. Fear does not make you somebody that's bad or good, right or wrong. You are who you are apart from fear. And when we see that, we understand fear in a whole different light. when we stop calling it bad or good, when we take away the labels. The fear that is there, the fear that is there for a reason, you know? It's to alert us to our attachment to the story. It's to alert us to our attachment to our far-fetched beliefs and notions of what life is supposed to be like. In its time, in its place, fear can become a wonderful tool to wake us up. To bring to light what we're missing, what we're tripping over, what's making life trippy on us. Going back to what Isaiah said, he said, "See, I lay a stone in Zion, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. The one who relies on it will never be stricken with panic." And there's being stricken with panic, and then there's being stricken with panic. There's being stricken with panic, like, panic. And then there's being stricken with panic, where it's, oh my God, panic. You know, there's fear, and then there's fear. And the only way I can really define or express the difference between the two is in the tone of my voice. You won't find this in Webster's. You won't find this in an encyclopedia. You won't find this in a book, in a language. It can only be expressed in the tone of my voice. There's fear and there's fear. The same word, but the tone of the voice gives it two different meanings, two different conceptions. So it's one thing to be stricken with fear or panic, and it's another thing to be stricken by it, to be really hit by it, you know. But when panic strikes you, when panic strikes us, we can learn to welcome it. Because it's got its purpose. It's there to disillusion us. To bust apart our illusions. It's there to alert us. Alert us that we're believing something that's just not true. Because you see, whenever you hear truth, truth frees you. It makes life lighter. It unencumbers you. Truth liberates you. The truth will give you peace. It will bring joy to you. But the things that scare you, or scaring you because they're just simply not true. You're believing something that's not altogether real, that might have a little bit of reality to it, that might have a measure of truth to it, but it's not altogether real. It's relatively real. It's not absolutely real. And the things that are absolutely real and the things that are relative, the things that are absolutely not real, let me put it that way. The things that are absolutely real and the things that are absolutely untrue, we seldom have a problem with those things. They're black and white. They're obvious in most cases. Are they not? Yeah, they are. But where we have problems, what trips us up are the things that are relatively true or untrue. Because see, there's really no real truth that is relatively true. But there are a lot of things that are relatively untrue, aren't there? Yeah. There are a lot of things that have a measure of truth to them, but they're not wholly true. And those are the things that end up scaring us, that end up frightening us, that end up upsetting us, that get us running, that get us hurt in a hurry, that get us fidgety, that eat at us. It's those little things like that eat at us. Jesus in the Gospels talked about hell being a place where the fire was not quenched and the worm dies not. You know? And people have made that into like an actual place where there's these killer worms that are chomping their way through people. But not I don't think it was like that. I think he's talking about the worms are things that eat at you, that eat at your being, that eat at your heart. Those little things that eat at you, those little things that perturb you, those little things that are not altogether true, that bite you, that nip at you, that cause you to lose sleep at night and toss and turn in your bed, that cause your anger to flare up in an instant when you're confronted with somebody or something, you know. But the fear has its purpose. It's there to bring you out of your illusion, to bring you out of that illusion of relative reality being absolute reality. And what does intense fear do when you're really stricken with panic, with fear? It paralyzes you. It stops you. It dead in your tracks. It keeps you from going forward. And when we take away the bad and the good labels of that fear and just let it be fear, we can see that when we look deeply, we can see that that's what fear is supposed to do. It's supposed to stop you. It's supposed to keep you from going in the wrong direction. It's to stop you, to turn you back from stepping off the edge of a cliff, from stepping in front of a car. So fear has its place when it stops you dead in your tracks, when it strikes you and stops you dead in your tracks. And keeps you from stepping in front of a car. Well, people would say that's good. So one person says fear is bad, another good, but fear, it's just fear. Fear is simply fear. It's men's rationale that make fear to be something right or wrong. And this is where I come in to say that there's a difference between fear and fear. There's a difference. Because men make fear into something wrong. When we make fear into being something wrong, we end up fearing fear. When we make fear into being something wrong, we end up fearing fear. We fear to allow fear to be. We fear to allow fear to be. But the funny thing is, the queer thing is, the strange thing is, that when we don't allow the fear to be, it feeds itself. When we suppress that fear and push it down and stuff it down, rather than allowing ourselves to feel that fear, what we're actually doing is taking that fear, and it's like a seed, and we're planting that into the soil of our being when we suppress it rather than welcome it. Fear that makes its way to the surface encounters light, and the light will deal with the fear. We only need to let the fear come to the surface. And the light will take care of the fear all on its own. But when we push the fear down, we plant that seed of fear into our being, and then it grows into one's heart rather than out of one's being. Then the fear will grow into one's heart rather than out of one's being. It'll root itself in the heart. And it'll reproduce itself. It'll bear fruit. It'll produce more fear. So when we resist the fear, what we end up doing is fearing the experience of fear itself. It perpetuates it. What we sow in fear grows in fear. What we sow in fear grows in fear. And if we sow it, it recycles itself. It starts a cycle of fear. How does that manifest itself? It manifests itself in a society that's running madly, crazily. It manifests itself in psychological disorders like depression and panic attacks. It manifests itself in people hoarding goods because they fear that life won't be faithful to bring the next meal in the morning. And the more they fear, the more they that fear grows, you know. Where if we could just let the fear surface and come to the surface and encounter the light of consciousness, that the light itself would take care of that. So it's a wiser thing not to fear the fear, but to embrace it. If it strikes you, if it hits you on the head, if the fear punches you in the gut, don't resist it. Just do like Jesus said and turn the other cheek. Don't try to conquer the fear with force. Don't try to conquer the fear with force. Rather overtake it, overwhelm it, overcome it with love. You need to face your fear, but not with force. Face your fear, but not with force. Let your fear be a flag of sorts. That you've taken something to be true that really isn't, you know. When we've taken something to heart as being true that isn't, then that breeds fear. We experience fear. But fear works with peace. Fear works with peace, right? It keeps us right. It keeps us in the right spot. It does. Fear and peace work together to keep us in the right space. Because when we have peace, and when we have fear, it's boundaries, sort of like that, you know. When you get away from where you're supposed to be, when you start to fall away from the truth, from reality, you feel fear. And then when you turn around and come back to it, you sense peace. So both the fear and the peace work together to sort of corral you into the place where you're supposed to be in life. When we take away the good and bad labels, it just makes it a lot easier for them to work together. When we take away the good and bad labels, it just makes it a lot easier for the fear and the peace to work together. And then, as we allow that to happen, as we allow that working together to occur, and sit back and observe it rather than interfere, we wake up, we see, we realize that all things are working together for our good, for the good of the one, for the good of the whole. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. You know, there's fear and peace working in harmony. See, the fear is there, the peace is there. To deny either one is folly. is denial. But to allow them to work together in harmony, well, that's what it's about. That's what it's about. To take away all the good and bad labels and just let them work together. To be sensitive to them. To when we get out into left field, that we sense the fear. And in that sensing of it, we come back. And when we encounter the peace, we're sensitive to it. We embrace that. We learn where we are supposed to rest as we are sensitive to the boundaries that fear and peace have put out there. Put out there, yeah. We find that when we get out of our business, when we get into other people's business, when we get into things that we have nothing to do with, we start to feel that fear. And then when we get back in our business, when we're taking care of the things that we're supposed to do, we feel peace. So that your fear doesn't need to be your enemy. It can be your ally if you feel it all together and don't resist it. If it alarms you, that's good. It's supposed to. Fear is not given you to comfort you. It's not given you to comfort you. Yet it's given to you by life itself. How do I know that? It's here. When it's here, it's there. You know? It's part of life. Fear is part of life. And it's given to you not to comfort you, but to alarm you. That's what it's there for. And if life wouldn't give that to you, it just simply wouldn't be there. What we have to realize is that the fear that life gives us. Now, there's the fear that comes out of the ego. I'm not talking about that fear. Okay? I'm talking about the fear that life gives us. It's given to us with good intention. With good intention. With good intention. Whether life gives us rocks to eat or bread to eat, it's what we need. It's what it takes. Life gives us what will nourish us. What will bring us to maturity. Now, if we see that the fear is coming out of a malevolence, out of a hostile universe, out of a separation, then we fear the fear itself. But if we see the fear coming with the intention of simply as being a tool to direct us, just as peace is a tool to direct us. If we see fear like that, then there's no fear. The fear of the fear isn't there. It isn't there. It isn't there. Then fear itself becomes just a tool. No more good, no more bad than peace is. No more right, nor more wrong than peace is. And then you can see when you can accept that, when you can walk in the consciousness of that, then the fear won't overwhelm you. The fear won't overtake you. The fear won't give you ulcers. The fear won't give you a heart attack. The fear won't draw you away from the life that's here right now. When you see the fear and the peace working together in harmony, then your life becomes harmonious. There's nothing to fight. There's nothing to resist. There is just what is. There is just peace. There is just fear. Both have their place. Both have their purpose. Life has given us both of them. Both of them. If life gives us a coin, it will have a head and a tail to it. It will have two sides to it. What life gives you has two sides to it. Yet it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It comes from the same intention, from the same love. So what happens when we deviate from the path of peace and begin to experience fear? When we're drawn away from the stillness and the silence that reveals everything, that is the light. That is the light that reveals everything. The stillness, the silence, the light are all one, all one. What happens when we lose consciousness with our source? When we get disconnected from our source, from that stillness, from that silence, from that light, then we begin to feel fear. And that fear can simply awaken us to return to the silence. To simply come back to it, to return to the source, to simply abandon yourself to the silence. See, there's no fear in love. There's no fear in silence. There's no fear in stillness. There's no fear in light. There's no fear. There's no fear. How do I know that? How do I know that? When I become out of array, when I become frazzled, hurried, anxious, upset, afraid, I've learned to take a deep breath, observe it, follow it in and out of my body, and to still myself, to quiet myself. And in that quietness, there's no fear. There's no fear. There's no fear. In the silence is within us because it's what we are. It's the peace. The peace is what we are. We won't find the peace outside of ourselves. We won't find the peace outside of ourselves. We won't find peace trying to drown out the silence. We won't find peace by cranking the radio up real loud, by watching the TV, by distracting ourselves. We won't find peace by forcing ourselves to forget. Peace is acquired when we make peace with what's here. Peace is acquired when we make peace with what is. When we bring the peace that we are to the life that's here at our feet. And if other people won't receive that peace, we simply let it come back to us. But we continue to embody the stillness. We continue to surrender to the silence. We continue to return to our senses and stay awake. To just abide in awe and wonder. And let that awe and wonder make you speechless. Let that awe and wonder just recycle itself like the fear did. Let the awe and plant the awe and wonder within you. Let it be what makes you speechless. Let it be what makes you stop in your tracks. Let it be what makes you stop and notice. To a world of possibilities. To a world of probabilities. To the possibility, to the probability that life has you covered. Life has your back. Life has made provision for all your shortcomings, all your mistakes. Make no mistake about it. Life has your back. Wake up and see what you think. See what you think. Take a good look at your thinking. See what you think rather than think what you see. Consider what you consider. Consider what you consider to be true. Consider what you consider to be true. Consider where your faith's at. You've heard in the past people told you to develop your faith, to work on your faith. But I'd say unto you, lose it. Lose your faith. Lose your faith in your perceptions. Lose your faith in your beliefs. Lose your faith in your knowledge. All these things have blinded you, left you wanting, suffering, lack. It's the faith is in the form of a belief, in the form of a notion that has caused you to lose hope. You know, so you think. You know, so you think. It's the thinking that's causing the unrest. It's the thinking that you know that troubles the heart. It's the thinking that you know that troubles the heart, that leaves no space for impermanence. That leaves no space for change, that draws you into despair. Knowing things makes you concrete and hard. Knowing things robs you of a possibility. Because there's nothing else possible when you know. When you know the way things are. When you know how I think. When I know how you think. It takes away the possibility. It takes away the possibility. Because nothing else is possible when you know. And your faith and your knowing is the end of your hope. Because hope comes out of the womb of impermanence. Jesus once said, he said, don't let your hearts be troubled. He said, you believe in God, believe also in me. Don't let your hearts be troubled. See you, share. See you, share. God bless you. Take care. But Jesus said, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. He said, believe also. Also. Not just to believe in God alone as a cold, as a hard reality, but also to believe in his Son, in the Word made flesh, in the expression of his heart, in the manifestation of his love. Believe also. Believe also in the expression of his heart, in the manifestation of his love. Things appear perilous when we see them apart from that love. Things appear perilous when we see them apart from the love that remains present. One second. Go ahead, Opie. I gotta take a call anyway. Okay, I'm back. I'm back. I'll drop the mic if you want to say something, Opie. Here, hold on. Hello, hello. Oh, I seen your hand up, but I guess you didn't. You don't know it's up. Okay, I'll continue then. Continue. I love phones. Anyway, let me pick up where I left off. Jesus said, he said, don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. So, not just to believe in God, but to believe in a loving God, in a God that has our best intention at heart, you know. And when we can see not just God, but a loving God, not just God, but a loving God, that makes all the difference in the world. It really does. Because then we can, if we see the things that go on around us and the things that people say to us and all these other things as coming from love, they cease to be distractions. They're part of the life that is. They're nothing that distracts us from living. They're simply part of it all. And all these things, all these trials, all these trips can become food for our joy. They can become food for our peace. When we let the fire of love, when we let them cook in that fire, it makes it It makes all these things that we encounter in life palatable, edible. It makes those things food for our joy, food for our peace, rather than killjoys, rather than things that upset us, Because, it's just hard to eat and digest a cold, hard world. It is. It's hard to eat and digest a cold, hard world. So we need to take that world and cook it in love. And let the love soften it. And let the love warm it. Take time to bring love to it before you consume it and eat it. Take time to bring love to it before you consume it and eat it. King Solomon, one of the wisest people in recorded history, said this once. He said, "A lazy man does not roast his prey, but the precious possession of a man is diligence." So there's a laziness that goes along with eating things raw, eating raw meat. In a sense, it's spiritual laziness to consume a cold, hard world, to eat it in haste, to eat it in fear, to eat it without cooking it with love first. What we gobble down in fear just leaves a bad taste in our mouth. What we eat in fear leaves a bad, bad taste in our mouth. What we eat when we eat hurriedly, when we eat anxiously, when we don't eat with love, not just eat your food, but eat everything. Eat it all. Eat it all. Every experience, every contact with somebody else, every drop of rain, every ray of sunshine. All of it. Eat it all. But cook it with love first before you eat it. If we don't, we end up in a sort of karma that ingratitude itself produces. We don't take time to appreciate what life gives us. Then we find ourselves always looking for more and more and more and more. And we end up chasing money, unrighteous mammon, as the Bible would call it, rather than eating the manna that's here, the daily bread that's given to us at no cost. Wow, I could keep going on, but I think I'm going to call it a rap at that. Yeah. I still see your hand up, Opaline. If you want the mic, you're welcome to have it. And if you don't take it, I'll just play a song or something until Lynn gets back. Okay, let's see. I'll change that.
Dwell in the midst of a